The tension between the US and Canada has reached a boiling point, and it's about to reshape the future of both nations. What was once a close economic partnership is now threatened by tariffs, trade barriers, and escalating political rhetoric. This isn't just a battle over trade deals. It's a clash of national interests, with each side digging in their heels. And the consequences are already starting to hit home. In 2025, the US and Canada find themselves at the epicenter of an escalating trade war that's unraveling decades of economic cooperation. What began with President Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods has quickly evolved into a larger confrontation, targeting everything from oil exports to the vital trade route through Canada to Alaska. The stakes couldn't be higher. Both nations are now locked in a battle over national pride, economic stability, and political influence. As tensions rise, both countries are taking measures that threaten to affect their everyday citizens, creating uncertainty, higher costs, and strained diplomatic relations. This video explores how the growing rift between the US and Canada is shaping the present and future for millions of people, and why this trade war could change the landscape of North America forever. The conflict started when President Donald Trump imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian goods in 2025, a decision driven by the US administration's broader economic strategy to address perceived trade imbalances. Trump's administration argued that Canadian trade practices, particularly in sectors like steel, aluminum, and dairy, were unfair to American industries. This marked the beginning of a series of retaliatory tariffs and countermeasures. For instance, the US dairy industry faced serious disruption with the imposition of Canadian tariffs. Dairy products, like milk and cheese, traditionally sourced from the US, for Canadian supermarkets, saw significant price hikes. By mid-2025, milk prices in the US are projected to rise by 5 to 7% due to Canadian retaliatory tariffs. This cost increase has directly impacted US households, pushing grocery bills higher. Similarly, the tariffs on US steel and aluminum exports to Canada saw a 15% increase in production costs for manufacturers across the US, affecting everyday consumer products such as bicycles, appliances, and automobiles. For American consumers, this meant higher prices for durable goods. These initial moves set the stage for further escalation as Canada, under the leadership of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, retaliated by implementing surcharges on electricity exports to several US states. This action, affecting states like Michigan and New York, has seen approximately 1.5 million households in the US facing rising energy bills. In essence, what began as a conflict over steel and aluminum quickly expanded to sectors that directly impacted everyday life: dairy prices, the cost of energy, and consumer goods. Alaska, being geographically separated from the mainland US, is critically dependent on Canadian land routes for access to the rest of the country. The transportation of goods to and from Alaska largely occurs through Canada, making this trade route indispensable for US industries that rely on Alaskan resources like oil, seafood, and minerals. Approximately 4,000 trucks per day travel through Canada to supply goods to Alaska, and many of these trucks carry goods essential to US markets. At the heart of the trade dispute is the possibility that Canada could block or heavily tax US trucks passing through Canadian territory on their way to Alaska. This route serves not only to supply consumer goods, but also to transport Alaskan oil, which accounts for 4 to 5% of US crude oil production. In 2024, this amounted to 426,000 barrels per day, being transported through Canada to US refineries. A disruption in this supply chain would have profound implications not only for the US economy, but also for global oil markets. If Canada moves forward with imposing tariffs or additional tolls on this trade route, it could cost the US economy over $140 million daily in lost revenue from the transportation of goods. This is particularly concerning given the scale of trade between the two nations, which amounts to over $762.1 billion annually. For US businesses that depend on Alaskan resources or goods from Alaska, This could lead to substantial financial losses, as companies would face either increased costs for transporting goods or an inability to access critical materials. For everyday consumers, the impact is immediate. Gasoline prices in the U.S. could rise by 10 to 15% due to disruptions in the oil supply from Alaska, as Alaska's oil exports are critical for meeting U.S. energy demands. At the same time, Alaskan seafood, including popular items like salmon, could see price hikes of up to 20% due to increased shipping costs through Canadian routes. These changes in pricing would affect not only the fishing industry, but also the retail sector, particularly grocery stores and restaurants that depend on seafood imports. The ripple effect of these trade disruptions is being felt acutely in border communities that rely heavily on cross-border trade. Cities like Buffalo, New York, and Windsor, Ontario, are directly impacted by the rising tariffs and delays at the US-Canada border. These cities host thousands of truck drivers and transport workers who face longer waiting times and higher transportation costs. For example, the Ambassador Bridge, one of the busiest trade routes between the US and Canada, experienced significant disruptions in 2022 due to protests and trade blockades, leading to an estimated $141.1 million in economic losses. Similarly, in 2025, truckers who rely on these routes for daily shipments now face average delays of over 4 hours at the border due to increased paperwork and inspections. The direct economic impact on these communities has been severe, with local businesses, particularly in sectors like retail and manufacturing, losing significant revenues due to delays in receiving goods. The impact on local employment in these areas has been just as harsh. The cross-border trade employs over 150,000 people in these regions. With tariffs and slowdowns at the border, many of these workers are now facing reduced hours or layoffs. Some reports suggest that these disruptions could lead to a 15% reduction in jobs related to cross-border trade, putting additional stress on local economies that are already grappling with the higher cost of living due to tariff-induced inflation. As the tariffs and trade restrictions continue, the effects on everyday consumers have been profound. For U.S. households, the increase in prices for essential goods is becoming more noticeable. According to an analysis by the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, U.S. households can expect an increase of at least $800 in annual costs due to higher prices on everything from dairy to electronics. In Canada, consumers have been feeling the effects of the tariffs in their grocery bills as well. For example, many consumer electronics, smartphones, laptops, and televisions imported from the U.S. have seen price increases of 10 to 12%. The impact is most noticeable in middle-income households, where rising costs for everyday items are eating into disposable income. Moreover, small businesses in both countries are facing immense pressure. Retailers in Canada, for example, are seeing a 20% increase in the cost of imported American goods, which is being passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices. For small business owners who rely on cross-border trade, the continued disruptions are a major concern as they struggle to balance cost increases with dwindling customer demand. Beyond the economic implications, these trade tensions have had a significant impact on the social and cultural dynamics between the U.S. and Canada. Nationalist sentiment has surged in both countries, and tensions are beginning to surface in everyday interactions. Canadians, frustrated with U.S. economic policies, have begun to question their reliance on the U.S. market, with a growing number of Canadians expressing a desire to reduce trade dependence on their southern neighbor. A recent survey in Canada found that 91% of Canadians are now more inclined to support policies aimed at reducing trade reliance on the U.S., and 75% are considering altering their travel habits due to rising tensions. For instance, in 2025, Canadian tourists have reduced their visits to the U.S. by approximately 12%, with many choosing alternative destinations within Canada or abroad. At the same time, U.S. citizens have become more cautious about traveling to Canada, with fears of higher costs and potential diplomatic disputes. For instance, a Quebec-based travel agent reported a 60% drop in U.S. travel bookings to Canada, especially among tourists from border states. This shift is evident at cultural and sporting events as well, where Canadian athletes have started using their platforms to make political statements against the U.S. trade policies, further straining relations. The ongoing trade tensions between the U.S. and Canada highlight the complex interdependencies between these two nations. As tariffs continue to disrupt industries and daily life, both countries will need to find a way to balance their national interests with their shared economic and political responsibilities. The question remains, will this escalating trade war end in a diplomatic resolution, or are we heading toward a prolonged conflict with far-reaching consequences for everyday citizens? The stakes are high, and both countries are preparing for a long road ahead. The future of Alaska's trade routes, consumer prices, and cross-border relations hangs in the balance as the U.S. and Canada navigate their most challenging diplomatic crisis in decades. What do you think? Will these trade tensions result in a lasting diplomatic solution, or will we witness further escalation? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more updates on this important issue. Business leaders warn that unless these measures are reversed, the everyday cost of living will continue to climb. Think about the effect on your paycheck and your shopping trips. With political debates raging, consumers are seeing real-world price hikes. Whether it's your weekly fuel cost or the price tag on groceries, these political decisions translate directly into higher living costs that hit the average family hard. Chapter 6. Trump's counterattack, social media, and policy rhetoric. Please explain to Governor Trudeau of Canada that when he puts on a retaliatory tariff on the U.S., our reciprocal tariff will immediately increase by a like amount. Not one to be outdone, President Trump responded forcefully on social media. On Truth Social, he warned that any retaliatory tariffs by Canada would prompt an immediate, even larger, round of U.S. tariffs. His tweet stressed that these measures were designed not only to protect U.S. jobs, but also to pressure trading partners into changing their policies regarding border security and illegal drug flows. Analysts note that while Trump's messaging is aimed at rallying his base, it also creates significant uncertainty in the markets. Indeed, stocks have reacted negatively to these tariff escalations, with many experts predicting a further economic slowdown if the trade war deepens. From the perspective of an ordinary consumer, Trump's tweets aren't just political rhetoric, they can lead to sudden price shocks. For instance, if a company decides to pass along the extra cost of new tariffs on your smartphone or laptop, you might see a price jump at checkout. These everyday items become more expensive simply because of tweets and policy decisions made far from our grocery aisles. Chapter 7. The broader economic impact, supply chains, and market stability. Beyond the direct tariff numbers, the broader economic impact includes disrupted supply chains that stretch from manufacturing plants in Canada to assembly lines in the U.S. Analysts warn that even a slight slowdown in cross-border shipments can have a domino effect on industries like automotive manufacturing, electronics, and agriculture. Inflationary pressures are mounting, with experts predicting that if these trends continue, both U.S. and Canadian households could face double-digit increases in certain cost of living areas. Imagine going to your local hardware store and finding that the price of lumber has jumped, or hearing that your favorite grocery store has fewer imported fruits due to supply delays. These supply chain issues mean that the things you rely on every day, from building materials to fresh produce, might not only cost more, but could also be less available, adding uncertainty to everyday shopping and planning. In summary, the trade dispute between the United States and Canada isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about a fundamental shift in one of the world's most intertwined economic relationships. As President Trump and Prime Minister Trudeau exchange pointed barbs, the broader implications for global trade are becoming clearer. This conflict is a bellwether for the rise of economic nationalism and could redefine how nations interact on the global stage. As we've seen today, the trade tensions between the U.S. and Canada are about more than just political posturing or economic theory. They have immediate, tangible effects on the daily lives of millions of people. From higher prices at the pump and in grocery stores to the potential loss of jobs in key industries, this trade conflict underscores the interconnected nature of modern economies. Staying informed is crucial because these policies aren't happening in isolation. They affect our families, our communities, and our future. If you found this analysis helpful, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more updates, and let us know in the comments how you think these changes will affect your day-to-day life.